Hey guys, in this video I'm putting portals on my 2022 Pioneer. Ran into a few issues with the ball joints. If you get the Texas Tough custom arms, the ball joints they send you will fit with portals if you tell them you're going to run 2021 portals, so that's good. But luckily I have some good neighbors and went over to Rich's shop and he had some ball joints for me and helped me press them in, so that was awesome. His information is right here on the screen. You see RB, ATV, and mowers. Hit him up if you need portals, players work done, parts, etc. He's like the hole-a-paw mechanic guru. But I got it all together. It worked out really good. I got some tips and tricks in here for you. Walk you through the install a little bit, and then at the end, testing it out, looking at rubbing, putting it in the pond, etc. So it's a long video, but a lot of helpful information if you've got a Pioneer. I was able to leave the axle in here and get these nuts off. It was a little tricky to get to the cotter pins. If you have a hard time, one thing you could do would be to take the lower control arm bolts, swing that out of the way, pop the axle out, get the axle out of the way, then take these nuts off, which may be how I have to put the portal bracket on. I haven't got there yet. We will see if there's enough room to get the nuts on here and here. I think there will be. But yeah, that was the only tricky part, was getting to those nuts, because they're kind of on the stock knuckle. You see they're buried back in here. So the nuts are kind of tight and it's hard to get to those cotter pins. Removing this from right here makes a big difference and giving you space to get in there and fight with those cotter pins. So that's a pro tip. And yeah, other than that, there's the knuckles, pretty easy. When you put this together, 2022 requires custom portal nuts. So these have been machined with new threads to fit the 2022 axles. That's the main difference between 2021 and 2022 as far as portals are concerned. I guess these ball joints are the same as 2021, otherwise this wouldn't work. Is this thread's different, so you got to get them machined, then you got to make sure you start them by hand, because obviously they're custom threads. Put some grease on there, don't over tighten them. All right, so here's the first issue I've run into. This upper ball joint does not fit in the knuckle, as you can see there. I think Honda made this ball joint a little bigger for 2022, and it doesn't fit in the 2021 knuckle bracket. Yay. So probably the thing to do would be to put a 2021 ball joint in the upper control arm and see if that fits. Got to try that out next. But I know this whole upper control arm is new for 2022. So looking at the computer, sorry to video my screen, but it's pretty clear that Honda changed the upper ball joint for the 2022 Pioneer to the one that has always been on the Talon. So that's why it doesn't fit with the portal bracket. Very annoying. But there's a chance I could install a 2021 ball joint into those arms. Now how do we figure that out? Well, let's see. Alright, so we can see here that this number 12 is the C-clip, and it is a 34mm C-clip. We click on the part number here, we can see that that fits every Honda four-wheeler ever. And it should also fit both the Pioneer and the Talon upper arms. There you go, Pioneer 1000 2018. So that leads me to believe that the bore in the upper control arm is the same size. So I should be able to install a 2021 ball joint into my 2022 arm, which by the way is not ideal because I'm losing some strength, because I have seen these break on the older Pioneers, and there's a reason Honda made it bigger, but whatever. And then I should be able to bolt the portals up. The other option would be boring out the portal bracket, but we don't want to do that. That causes a lot of issues. So either get some Kellers for the top, or put some OEM 2021 ball joint. All right, so progress was halted in the front due to the upper ball joint situation. Working on the rear now. Obviously the rear is always much easier. One thing to point out is that you have to add these little adapters onto all your axles, which I find to be kind of goofy. It makes your axle stick even farther out of the diff, but at least they give you that adapter. So you know, that's adding some more width to your machine, whatever. Also, the Pioneer, even on 2022, still uses 10mm hardware on the knuckles, which means that these bushings are pretty small, this hardware is pretty small. Definitely want to make sure you torque these well and re-torque them a few times after you do the first couple rides. You really want bigger hardware than this on the portal. It's great that you have 12mm on the frame side. That's awesome. It's probably more important, but you'd also would like to have a bigger bolt there. It is what it is. Even my old Razor 900 had 10mm on the top, but 12mm hardware on the bottom. So it's fine, it works. 6-inch portals should be fine. If you have 8-inch portals, I'd be a little worried about this hardware. I'd keep an eye on it. All right, so went over to Rich's shop and he had some ball joints for me. So if you look at these two ball joints right here, these are ball joints out of a Rubicon 2021 Pioneer 500, etc. These are the ball joints that came out 2022. Those are off the Talon. So you see the difference, way bigger right here where this cone taper is. Same threads though. And also this top part's the same, so they pressed in there, no problem. Everything looks good. Snap rings in there, fit just fine. One other thing we noticed while doing this is that these new arms, the upper arms in the front of these 2022 Pioneers, are beefy as hell. This is about 100 times stronger than the previous Pioneers. So that's pretty nice. I hope that I can use them. I may end up having to do forward arms. And also, these have those spherical bushings. So what they did for 2022 on the Pioneer is they put Talon bushings and Talon ball joints. Yay Honda, good upgrade. Hopefully Super ATV will start making 2022 portal backplates and they will accept the bigger ball joint. But for now, this is how you got to do it. All right, so the install continues. We're about 75% of the way there. I'm waiting to do the brakes on this side because you have to swap the calipers. So I do them together at the end. Do that on the rear too. You swap the calipers from driver to passenger side because Super ATV moves them from in front of the wheel to behind the wheel. In order to keep the bleeders at the top, you got to swap the calipers. Pretty standard shit. This part of the install went pretty well. The only thing that's a little tricky is the brake lines they give you. The part numbers in the instructions do not match the part numbers on the bags. Which is a little annoying, but whatever. We're smart, we can figure that out. So those are the part numbers, the SKU numbers BL082. I got a BL098. So all you got to really figure out is that the front and rear brake lines they give you are actually the same length. Just the clocking where this flat spot is 90 degrees off, and you can actually see that in the pictures there. Basically, the ones that line up flat when you have the circle flat are the fronts. And you can look at the picture there and see that that's flat, those are the fronts. So it's pretty easy to figure out. No real mysteries there. And yeah, I'm using the tiny 2021 upper ball joints, which by the way are the same as a four-wheeler. Pretty pathetic. I found all the parts. So these are the same portals that were on the 2022 Rubicon. So I'd kind of bastardized them in with that Rubicon kit, and now I'm putting everything back onto here. So it's been a little bit of an adventure figuring out where all the parts were strewn across the garage, but I think I've found almost everything so far. All right, so it's complete. I just got it aligned and did the brake lines. I'm gonna talk you through a few things that are kind of tricky on here. So this brake line up here, it's held on with this little clip guy. It's hard to get a pair of pliers in here because there's a bunch of shit around it. What I did was I took this little tiny stubby flat blade, went behind it like this, and just pried it out like that. So that's how I got it out. Getting it in was easy. Routing the brake lines, you have a lot of discretion there. It depends on your wheel offset and your wheel size for the most part, how you're gonna route them. You definitely wanna make sure they're not rubbing the wheel, obviously. Mine look a little goofy right now, but this might be how I have to run them. So I've got one zip tie right there, you can see, and then one zip tie right there. And the reason I had to do that is because I'm running 18-inch wheels that get pretty close to the portal brackets. So in order to keep the wheel from rubbing the line, it's still about ½ an inch away. There's just not a lot of space to route it. So I had to tie it down hard there, and then the service loop has to get done on top of the CV axle. If you have bigger wheels, that'll be easier. So you can see that when I'm all the way turned, it's tight that way. And then when I go all the way the other way, that slack's got to get made up. I go all the way left, and that slack gets made up in a loop right there. I don't love that. I'd like it to be a little more out of the way. So I'd like that loop to kind of end up here somehow, or down there, but don't have a ton of options. I'm going to drive it around and test it out with the weight on it Wait until you get the wheels bolted on to route your brake lines, because you might need to adjust them, loosen up the bolt, change how the eyelet goes and all that stuff. But other than that, pretty good. One problem I do have is the upper ball joints don't quite fit perfect. And what I mean by that is the thread isn't long enough. So that's how the bottom one looks. That's how it should look. The top one, you can see I can't get a cotter pin in it. And I think that's just because, you know, there's a couple different versions of these ball joints. If I had ordered the exact ones from a Pioneer 2021, it might have been better. It'll work fine. I'm just going to put some Loctite on there in lieu of having a cotter pin. And of course, I'm going to check the torque on those after I ride it around the yard a few times. But the arms are really beefy. I think they're going to handle the 6-inch portals and the 33s just fine without frame stiffeners or track bars or any of that stuff. Tie rod's plenty strong enough, nice and easily adjustable. No need to change that, in my opinion. And then in the rear, routing the brake lines is much simpler, just because you don't have steering to deal with. So that's how they route in the rear. And then a couple zip ties up to there, and you got a service loop up here for suspension flex. So rear is pretty easy and looks a little cleaner. Let me show you where I put the eyelet pointing. So this is where the instructions kind of say to do it, and that made the most sense to me to keep it all protected. You could flip this and run the brake line out here somewhere, but that just seems dangerous. You want it protected down there as much as you can. That's where it's going to be dragging. The lower down the brake line is, that's where you want the most protection. So as far as rubbing, we haven't put the weight on it yet, but you can see, as I suspected, when the wheel's straight and there's no weight on it, pretty good amount of clearance. But you know, I'm pretty sure that once the wheel comes up, there's going to be some significant rubbing. So let's put the weight on it. Floor jack's stuck. So it got a little wider when I set it down. These tires have 0 psi in them right now. I don't quite remember why they have 0 psi in them. So let's roll it back and forth a little bit, let it settle. Pop it in neutral. Doing this, let the suspension settle out. Man, it's harder to roll with these big tires on with 0 psi. So there's the clearance in the front, 0 psi. Rear looks about right, plenty of clearance. Don't need any raking in the rear for 33s. But I think I will probably have to do the front raked arms. Got to decide if I want to do Super ATV or Texas Tough Customs. Kind of leaning towards Super ATV because I don't need all that much rake. But Texas Tough Customs would be good. They give you 3.5 inches of rake. Super ATV gives you like 1.5 or 2 if I want to go to a 35 at some point, but I probably won't. I think I'm going to keep it about this size. Anyway, so I'm just going to air up the tires now and go drive it around. This thing is definitely tall and definitely geared low. I need to bleed the brakes still, so the brakes are pretty spongy. Let's see what our top speed is in low first gear. All right, so I can still do 30 miles an hour in low range, which is pretty decent. All right, we got some water in the ditch here from the hurricane. Let's see what you can do. This is in turf mode, so one-wheel drive, rear diff unlocked. It's geared so low it wants to upshift like crazy. Oh man, what's happening here? We must lock the rear differential. Two-wheel drive engaged. What a difference. So it's worth noting that I've got very narrow offset wheels. These are the 6+1 STI HD9 V-Locks. Haven't had any rubbing yet. Let's go flex right on the hill. All right, so this is a good way to see if your tires are gonna rub. Put it in a cross axis situation like this. So that tire's up high, that tire's up high, this tire's off the ground. You can see how much clearance we have. So even flexed up like that, you got a little bit of clearance straight. If I were to turn the wheel, what happens? Yeah, so you see I'd have some rubbing right there. So you have some rubbing when steered in a pretty flexed out situation. So you could run 33 Aztecs with this wheel offset with just 6-inch portals, and I'm gonna do that next weekend. But ideally you want some forward rake, or you're gonna have some rubbing issues in the front. This is exactly about what I thought was gonna happen. I'm gonna see how annoying it is out at Holopaw, and if it works good, I'll probably leave the factory arms, because factory bushings are the best, especially on a Honda. But it drives pretty good. I'm probably gonna flip it over because I made it 6 inches taller and only about 6 inches wider, because I have very narrow offset wheels, but I like the narrow offset to keep it steering, and so it steering well, and so it fits down trails easily. You can see the back doesn't flex quite as much because the back has a sway bar. Pretty cool. Because this thing is top heavy and has no brakes right now. Safety first. I need some help. I need someone to come over and help me bleed the brakes. Let's go low range, 4-wheel drive diff lock. See how fast that engages? Super nice diff lock system. This hill's pretty steep. I tuned it up with a tractor, but I think the old Pioneer can make easy work of it. Put it in manual mode so we stay in first gear. Wow, it sucks at climbing stuff now because it's so high. That's kind of expected. The taller you make stuff, the worse it climbs. I'm also driving with one hand for maximum safety. A little bit of throttle. Yeah, it's a little scary now that it's so top heavy, that's for sure. Go back into turf mode. And it's back into turf mode. I love the 4-wheel drive system on the 2022s. Overall though, pretty good drivability so far. I haven't heard any rubbing. So these are 45% 6-inch portals. So I got some seriously low gears. Oh, that rubbed a little bit right there. That's the first time I felt it. Go ahead and put it in 4-wheel drive. Let's go ahead and flip over into the pond. No, hope not. Oh! I'm about to retorque the ball joint bolts, all 4 of those again. I'm going to retorque these 4 back bolts on the knuckles. I think it's about good. That's all I need to do. Of course, bleed the brakes a couple times, get the brakes working well, and then we're good to go.